Well, hello there. This is Shane from Shane's Reviews, and I hope you are having a great day today. What we'll be talking about? F. Paul Wilson, CrissCross, which this is a later book in the series, and we're starting to make our way through them. And let's address it. Is this more just filler? Now, I don't think that so far any of the books could actually be considered filler because they all have this different story, even though sometimes it might be a little bit formulated on the way to get there. But there's a lot of stuff that's kind of new and certainly interesting because it seems like we're starting to get to the point whenever it comes to Repairman Jack. So, essentially, let's take care of the real quick things. Narration was by Christopher Price, like I said. Good job throughout. Starting to enjoy his reading and the way that he narrates it. Now, sometimes I kind of feel like on the production choices that the producers of this thing, they could have made a couple better choices on how to direct him for what he was doing. I think that he could really be successful. I could just be talking in the wind. Anyhow, for the long of it all though, there really wasn't anything that was completely distracting from it in the way that he portrayed the characters and this sort of a thing. As far as, is it worth your time, efforts, and energies? I find it fascinating because there will be all these little hints of everyday life that will be scattered through it, or maybe even conspiracies or just unfactual, factual things that you've heard throughout life that'll be in these books. And I like the way that that is kind of lent, borrowed, changed for the purposes of the literature. Now, I'm not saying that it's a hallmark. I'm not saying that it's the great American novel. I'm not saying that he is the next Charles Dickens. No, I'm not. But what I am saying is it's gritty, kind of raw in some ways. It's definitely a lot of action and big heroic person versus the world. That's the pivotal thing about it, is it's usually very compartmentalized to just that. There's also this underlying emotional story about him and his girlfriend that became his girlfriend quite by accident, and how they're going to deal with his absence from everyday life. You see, Jack's got this problem where whenever he was in his mid-20s, and we find out this in the last 2 or 3 books, what happened to his mom and why he started doing what he was doing. It was kind of alluded to before, but now it's got fleshed out. So he just kind of removed himself from existence. He hasn't filed taxes. He hasn't done all those sorts of things that as a citizen of a country you're supposed to do. So he's a ghost. He's an enigma. He doesn't actually exist, which also is not ignored. He doesn't have the benefits in the books that most authors would give their characters whenever they have that anonymity. No, instead, whenever he goes to airports, he has problems. It's relatable and there's a realisticness to it, even though some of the sci-fi in it is absolutely far-fetched. Now, with that little bit of the backstory, don't you dare cut that out, Scraps. I see you. This is important. If they haven't read it before, they need to know that. Don't get your hand off that mouse. See you. Don't. No. I'm gonna have to put you back in the cage. So with all that out of the way, like I said, there's been things that were alluded to. There's things that we didn't know. I mean, there was this lady in previous books, and there seems to be an occurring type of a thing where there's this old woman with a dog that he'll meet, and they represent one faction. Then there's the otherness, and they have their faction. And then there is the I don't care, but I want to win person / entity. And that's the third. So there's 3 forces that are trying to affect Jack's universe and the universe that all the people in Jack's universe lives in, of course, by default. So that's a grand simplification of what's happening with the books, where it's moving, the direction it's going. Now, Jack's girlfriend, she's with child, she's pregnant, and we have a real world situation happen, and she's constantly referred to in the book, which as a reader was appreciated. And I've had my suspicions why those scenes were there, because sometimes whenever you're reading a series, authors will do things that are sneaky, and sometimes they won't be. Sometimes they're not purposeful, and they'll go back and they'll use something they put in another book and go, aha, gotcha, sucker. But I don't think this is what this is. During this time period, during this book, there's a few things that happen, and it has to do with a couple people that were affected by the otherness, the negative side of it, and they were setting up a church, and one just wanted to be hippy dippy, love them all, leave them type of a person, set up a commune in the 60s and 70s, that kind of a thing. A lot of people were giving him land, and he just really wanted to bang all the chicks first. So he made himself kind of like a godhead, made up this thing, and said, hey, I will help you awaken this thing that I just made up if you let me sleep with you, and then you can go sleep with all the other men, and you can help them awake theirs. All right. The other person comes to him because he had a kind of a dream / vision as well about this sort of thing, and starts to use this commune type thing to set up a church. And this church is, of course, a fake church, and this fake church, its primary mission is to help you awaken the thing that we made up. And we're just going to push everything that happened in the 60s and 70s under the rug, as it were, and then give us all your money so we can awaken your thing. And so that's the secondary portion of that whole little deal. We're at the end of the book, but there's things that happen during finding out about certain pillars that are being made and put places. And we start to find out how these things all correlate. Well, I think that the reason why this scene keeps getting referenced with Gia and how that real world thing happened with her and the things that are happening, this is going to be a very hard pregnancy for Gia. I mean, we have all these things that are happening, and it seems like the closer that this pinnacle moment and this pinnacle moment happens, the weaker she gets and the more struggle there is. And then whenever it comes to the book wrapping out, she starts to get, more back to herself and her energy levels. And this is kind of done in some cleanup at the end of the book. Sometimes in life, you can come up with something and you can think it's the greatest thing. And the perfect example of this is this weekend I went to an escape. And of course we wore masks and we used hand sanitizer. And once we were alone, and that kind of a thing, we took our mask off, but we did have some fun. We did win, did get through it, but there was a thing. The people that made the puzzles and the people that made the stuff, they were expecting people to make intuitive leaps that had no substance or guidance behind. I'm not sure how other escape rooms are set up across the world, right? But usually there's a story beyond, hi, you're at this place, you've got 1 hour, begin. There needs to be a why do I care, right? Yes, we all agree with that. That's a very important thing for me and this channel and for life in general is, why do I care that this is happening? How do I feel about this? And it's not me. What it is if I'm creating something, I want somebody to be able to understand where I'm coming from, and they should be asking the question, why do I care what you're making? And in this puzzle, there was a lot of things that just weren't there. At one point, I had to brute force a lock. What I mean by that is I don't mean that I got a crowbar out and shattered the thing. I don't mean that. I'd figured out things and I'd made leaps that other people hadn't. I mean, the first 3 minutes that I was in, I saw 2 clocks, so I adjusted one and a door opened. I was like, whoa, next room, yay. But on the same thing, there was all this stuff that was scattered around that if you're an old school gamer, you'll get this reference. There was red herrings, and nobody likes a red herring whenever you only got X amount of time. But also, there's an amount of information that should be disseminated in order for you to be able to get to the next stage. So it should be very clear. You start here and you work to here. And then you've got all these other things that you need to work out. I'm no dummy, and the people that I was with, they were no dummy. And if we had been average people, we wouldn't have made it through this thing, which was rated for children. And it was kind of weird to see that they expected these kids to be able to figure these things out. Whenever I see Greek language, I know what Greek language is. I know how to equate that to regular alphabet. I know how to do ciphers. I know how to do this, and this. But a kid doesn't know these things. And if the adults hadn't been in the room, the kids would have never got there. They might have opened up the door, but I don't think that they would have got through the puzzle at all, because there was points and times where the guesses I made in conjunction with somebody else, as we got to the end of the time, we had literally 10 seconds left whenever we both realized what the answer was to open up the last lock, which had nothing to do with the exception of the theme of the thing. So it was really frustrating to get through that. And if you want to see a good way of going through an escape room, Mark Rober has a video on it. It's actually really good, because these are things that over the years I had figured out about them. So well done, Mark. I applaud. There's a reason why I'm telling that story. There was a broken story in this escape room. It didn't have a flow. There was no, what is that? Feng Shui, right? The dragon wasn't able to get through the room. It just wasn't. That was the most frustrating part to me, because there was half of a puzzle whenever it came to figuring out a particular lock. And there was 2 of them, and the code was set the same on both of them. But you could get the last 2 numbers, but there was nothing telling you what the first 2 numbers was. And so I literally at one point had to brute force it by going 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 2, 2, 3, 4. And the only reason why I did that was because I was so frustrated at that point because there was a lack of a story to get me to where I needed to figure out the information. Because usually in escape rooms that I've done in the past, there's a bit of a story. And that's what makes it fun, is getting those little snippets of the story to get you to the next place. So, back to the reason why I'm telling that story is in the books, not necessarily F. Paul Wilson, but some authors, they leave out a bunch of stuff that's important for whatever reason, and then add it in at the end of the book. And that's a pet peeve of mine, because if you don't know how to tell your story in a way that other people can grasp it throughout, you shouldn't spoon feed the answers at the end to clean it up. And F. Paul Wilson did not do that in this. At first, that's what I thought was happening. I was like, oh man. But instead, what happened was it was a reward for the people that had been reading the entire series. And so that was like a little hurrah. It was really good to get that information because the stuff that was given to us at the end of this book doesn't wrap out this series at all. It only actually makes you ask more questions instead of going, oh, okay, I'm good. Now we're starting to get to that point where it's gone from just this bloke, this guy, that just goes out and fixes people's problems, hence Repairman Jack, to a actual story where things are going to really depend upon him for the future of humanity. If he does his job right, nobody's really going to know that he did it. And so I find that part of this story fascinating. But we also have the issues of his own personal life. So the further he goes, the more fixes that he does, the more involved he's going to become with this problem with the otherness. It's kind of a unique view on this character because it's fleshing him out. He's becoming, as a character, more emotionally developed, which is good to see in a series because at first, it's like, is this going to work? Oh, I've actually got readers. Yes, it is going to work. Good. Instead of just changing the character real quick, over the course of time, we've got to know this character. And on that note, these are the most interesting things that we found this week. And thank you for that, Scraps. And to all you guys and gals that made comments, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. What was that? There was one that, Clone War review, Geek on My Sleeve, said, great review, Shane. I started the series, but after 3 or 4 books, they all started to feel the same. I agree with you in a big way. So, is this book, CrissCross by F. Paul Wilson, worth your time, effort, and energy? If you're looking for something that kind of fits that detective noir style and the I'm a bad A, I can beat you up and doesn't hesitate to get into people's faces, a very direct person, then also likes sci-fi and supernaturally type things, the series is probably going to be enjoyable for you. Anyway, so like, share, subscribe. This is Shane with Shane's Reviews, and I hope that you had a great week this week, and I hope that your next week is as good. I look forward to seeing you next Friday, 3 o'clock, and I'm not sure which one of the videos over here that you would pick, but if you pick one of those two, I will see you in the next video. Bye. Bye-bye.